The day was everything I had meticulously planned and secretly dreaded. The air in the bookstore was thick with the scent of new paper and expensive coffee, a backdrop for the most important event of my life. Or, more accurately, my son Liam's life. He was there, standing tall and confident beside the table of his first published novel, The Unspoken Mentor. My heart, a complex mix of pride and a bitterness I had carefully nurtured for years, throbbed in my chest. He was a perfect portrait of success, dressed in a sharp blazer, his face a replica of mine, but softened by a kindness he must have inherited from him. The him in question was standing a few feet away, talking to a group of his former colleagues. David, the man who, by all accounts, had stepped into my role as the primary inspirational figure in Liam's life. I watched him, an expert at reading social cues, as he laughed and gestured, his ease a stark contrast to my own perpetual state of internal conflict. David, the stepfather, the man who had seamlessly filled the void I had stubbornly left open, the void I was now trying to reclaim. I had come here with a mission, a speech prepared not in celebration, but as a subtle public reclamation of my territory. I had rehearsed it 100 times in my mind, a performance designed to subtly undermine David while appearing gracious. It was my final, calculated move. My plan was simple: get on that stage, thank Liam for his success, and then deliver the line that would, I hoped, shift the narrative back to me. The irony was not lost on me. I was trying to rewrite my own history in front of a live audience. As I saw David glance my way and offer a polite, unassuming smile, my resolve hardened. This was my moment. The spotlight was about to be mine, and I would use it to show everyone, including Liam and David, who the true hero of this story was. Enjoying the story so far? This is just the beginning of a gripping tale of family, secrets, and a mother's painful journey. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of the story. The host introduced me with the kind of glowing praise reserved for a proud mother. I walked to the podium, the microphone feeling cold against my fingertips, the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing down on me. I saw Liam smile encouragingly from his seat in the front row. I saw David, his hands in his pockets, a picture of relaxed support. My own hands, however, were clenched into fists, hidden from view. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady, my smile a perfect, polished mask. Watching Liam's dream come to life has been the greatest joy of my own. I remember when he was just a little boy, writing stories in his notebook, his imagination running wild. I spoke of a past I had idealized in my mind, a version of our life where I was the sole inspiration, the unwavering support system. I painted a picture of late nights spent with me, of encouragement coming only from my lips. It was a carefully constructed narrative, full of half-truths and selective memory. My gaze flickered to David. He was listening intently, his face unreadable. I had expected a reaction, a flicker of discomfort or annoyance, but there was nothing. This only fueled my frustration. He was too good at this, too good at being the silent, supportive figure, a role I despised. I wanted him to crack, to show a sign of the struggle he must feel, but he was a monolith of calm. I continued my monologue, weaving a tapestry of a mother's tireless dedication. The crowd nodded, their faces full of admiration. I was succeeding. My narrative was taking hold. I was the protagonist of this story, and David was merely a footnote, or so I believed. My victory felt sweet, a tangible triumph over the man who had dared to take my place. But as I looked at Liam, his expression was not one of shared victory. It was something else, a subtle shadow, a hint of confusion in his eyes. He knew my version of the story wasn't the whole truth. After my speech, the room buzzed with congratulations. People approached me, praising my wonderful words, my incredible bond with Liam. I soaked it all in, each compliment a small victory. But amidst the praise, a quiet unease began to settle in my stomach. Liam had retreated to the corner, speaking with a young woman I didn't recognize, his back to me. He was deliberately avoiding my gaze. I saw David approach Liam, and they spoke for a few moments, their heads bowed together in a private conversation. I watched them, my heart a knot of jealousy. The ease of their communication was a stark contrast to the strained, carefully curated conversations I had with my own son. Liam had always been my boy, my creation, but in a way I couldn't comprehend. David had managed to build a deeper, more meaningful connection. I finally managed to corner Liam alone. "Liam, everything okay?" I asked, my voice a carefully crafted blend of concern and casualness. He didn't look at me directly. "Mom, that was a lot." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I was just telling the truth. All the sacrifices I made." "Mom, David was the one who drove me to every single meeting with my agent." He interrupted, his voice low, his frustration barely contained. "He was the one who stayed up with me, helping me edit Chapter 7 until 4 in the morning. He's the one who paid for the new laptop when mine broke, so I wouldn't lose a single word." His words hit me like a physical blow. The sacrifices I had made were financial, material. The sacrifices David had made were of time, of emotional investment. He was a true partner in this journey, while I was a spectator trying to claim credit for the race. The cold, hard truth of the situation was suddenly laid bare. The realization was a sharp, bitter pill. My carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and Liam was the one holding the hammer. He continued, his voice softer now but no less firm. "David didn't do it for praise, Mom. He did it because he loves me. He never wanted to take your place. He just filled the gaps." The word gaps hung in the air, a devastating indictment of my own failings. I had been so focused on David's presence that I hadn't seen the absence of my own. I had always been there, but I had never been present. I had been too consumed with my own bitterness, my own feelings of being replaced, to see the genuine love and support David was providing. My heart, once a fortress of pride, felt suddenly fragile. I looked around the room, at the people who had just applauded my lies. I had wanted their admiration, but now it felt like a heavy burden. I had wanted to hurt David, to diminish his role, but all I had done was expose my own emptiness. The silence between Liam and me stretched, filled with the weight of my unsaid apologies. David approached us then, and for the first time, I saw him not as an enemy, but as a man who had loved my son unconditionally, despite my hostility. He put a hand on Liam's shoulder, and a warmth passed between them that I had never been able to replicate. The book launch, my grand stage for a public reckoning, had backfired spectacularly. I had intended to show everyone my power, but all I had done was reveal my own vulnerability. The applause still rang in my ears, but now it sounded like a hollow echo of a victory I had never truly earned. The cold night air outside the bookstore felt more welcoming than the warmth of the celebratory crowd inside. I felt a wave of sickness wash over me, a physical manifestation of my emotional defeat. This story is far from over. If you want to see how this conflict unfolds and what happens next, be sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next chapters. The aftermath of the book launch was a slow, agonizing descent. The phone calls from friends and acquaintances that followed were filled with veiled praise, polite conversations that felt like judgment. "Your speech was so emotional," one friend said, and I knew she meant, "You looked so desperate." My carefully curated image of the proud, self-sufficient single mother was shattered. Liam's communication with me became a series of short, clipped texts. "Going to dinner with David. Busy. Can't talk now." He wasn't lashing out. He was simply pulling away. It was a silence louder than any argument, a punishment more severe than any verbal rebuke. His absence in my life was becoming more profound, and I was the one who had created it. I tried to reach out. I called him, leaving messages that were too long and too full of hollow apologies. I tried to schedule lunch, but he was always too busy. The city, once my dominion, felt oppressive. I walked through the streets of New York, the concrete canyons seeming to mock my loneliness. The vibrant pulse of the city, once a source of energy, now felt like a relentless rhythm I couldn't keep up with. One day, I was sitting in a cafe, staring at my reflection in the window. I saw a woman with tired eyes and a forced smile. I saw the bitter lines etched around my mouth. I saw the person I had become, a person I no longer recognized. David had been a mirror, and I had been too afraid to look at my own reflection. I had blamed him for my unhappiness, but the real culprit was my own resentment, my own refusal to let go of the past. The bitterness I had nurtured for so long had become a poison, and it was now consuming me from the inside out. My life was becoming a reflection of my empty heart, a hollow space filled with regret. A few weeks later, a creamy white envelope arrived in my mailbox, an anomaly in a world of bills and junk mail. The invitation was for a family dinner at Liam's apartment. The card felt delicate in my hands, a fragile olive branch extended after a season of silence. My first instinct was to decline. The thought of facing Liam and David in a setting of domestic normalcy was a terrifying prospect. My stomach knotted with a familiar cocktail of anxiety and shame. I had spent so long creating a narrative of their estrangement that the idea of them as a cohesive unit felt like a direct refutation of my entire existence. But the alternative, a life of complete isolation in my large, quiet house, was even more terrifying. I arrived at his small but cozy Brooklyn apartment, the scent of garlic and roasted chicken welcoming me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. David was in the kitchen, a domestic figure I was completely unaccustomed to seeing. He was laughing with Liam, their easy rapport a living testament to the bond I had tried so hard to sever. My anxiety mounted with every casual gesture and shared glance. The dinner was a polite but strained affair. I tried to contribute to the conversation, to sound interested and engaged, but my words felt clunky and out of place, like an old record skipping on a new turntable. I watched as David effortlessly steered the conversation, asking Liam about his plans, his work, his dreams. He was genuinely interested, a quality I realized I had lacked for so long. At one point, Liam mentioned a new plot idea for his next book. "It's about a man who finally reconnects with his estranged mother," he said, and I felt a jolt of hope. But she has to come to terms with the fact that he has a new family, a new life. His words were a direct hit, a story I knew was a thinly veiled metaphor for our own lives. The carefully constructed fortress of pride I had built was crumbling. The raw, unedited emotions I had so long suppressed swelled within me. My carefully maintained composure shattered, and I could feel the hot, prickling sensation of tears welling in my eyes. I excused myself from the table, my composure completely gone. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I retreated to the small bathroom and locked the door. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, and the woman staring back at me was a stranger, a caricature of the person I had wanted to be. The wrinkles around my eyes, the bitter lines etched around my mouth, they were all a map of my inner landscape. I had spent so long building a wall around my heart that I had forgotten how to feel, how to connect, how to love, without condition. The sight of my own face, streaked with tears, was a shocking and painful revelation. A few moments later, a gentle knock came at the door. "Can I come in?" It was David. His voice was soft, devoid of any judgment or triumph. I didn't answer, but I unlocked and opened the door. He came in, not a word of "I told you so" on his lips, and sat on the edge of the tub. His presence was a quiet, comforting anchor in a storm of my own making. "I know it's hard," he said finally, his voice a low rumble. "But Liam loves you, you know. He always has. It's just complicated." His words were a kindness I hadn't deserved. For the first time, I truly looked at him, not as an obstacle, but as a man who had stepped up. I saw the genuine warmth in his eyes, the deep affection he held for my son. My bitterness, which had defined me for so long, felt like a distant foreign country. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, the words catching in my throat, a true apology for my every slight, my every cruel word. "I'm so sorry for everything." He nodded, his face empathetic. "I know. But you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be here. For him." His words were a lifeline, a simple truth that cut through all the noise, all the lies, and all the bitterness. I had been so focused on being a hero in my own story that I had failed to be a mother. I had wanted to win, but the only prize was a son who was slipping away. This is a pivotal moment in our story. If you've been on this journey with us, now is the perfect time to subscribe to the channel and join our community. Your support helps us continue to create these deeply emotional and authentic stories. The following weeks were a slow and painful journey of healing. I started with small gestures, but they felt monumental. My first step was a text to Liam. Not a long, rambling apology, but a simple, genuine one. "I'm sorry for my speech at the launch. I was wrong." No excuses, no justifications, just a humble admission of guilt. He responded with a single word: "Thank you." It was a start. A small crack in the dam of our strained relationship. I began to actively listen, to ask questions about his life without an agenda. I asked about David, about his family, about his work. I was learning to be a part of his life, not as the hero, but as a supporting character, a role I had never wanted but now desperately needed. The role felt strange, but also incredibly freeing. The weight of being the main character, the one who had to be perfect, was gone. The city, with its relentless energy, no longer felt like a place of judgment. It was a place of new beginnings. I started to notice the little things, the way the light hit the skyline at dusk, the quiet moments of connection between strangers in a bustling coffee shop. I was seeing the world with new eyes that were no longer clouded by bitterness. I even called David. The conversation was awkward at first, but I persevered. I thanked him for being there for Liam, for being the man I hadn't been. "You were the parent he needed," I said, and the words were a truth I had been afraid to speak for so long. His response was humble. "We both were, just in different ways." I began to write, not for a public audience, but for myself, a raw and honest account of my journey, a way of processing my mistakes. My relationship with Liam began to heal, one small, tentative step at a time. We had lunch at a quiet cafe in the West Village, and for the first time, the conversation was easy, real. He talked about his book, about his dreams, and for the first time, I felt like a genuine participant in his life, not a spectator from a distance. He told me about the challenges of his second novel, the pressure to live up to the success of the first. My old self would have given a cynical retort, but this new me listened and offered genuine encouragement. "I'm thinking of dedicating my next book to you and David," he said one afternoon, and I felt a wave of emotion so strong it almost brought me to my knees. "You don't have to do that," I said, my voice thick with emotion, choked with gratitude. "I know," he said, a gentle smile on his face. "But I want to." You're my mother, Mom. And David, he's family. You both inspired this story in different ways. His words were the greatest gift he could have given me, an acknowledgement of my past failings, and a promise of a future where we could be a family, a true, complete family. The bitterness that had once defined me was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. I had lost the battle for the spotlight, but I had won something far more valuable: a second chance at my son's love. I had come to this city with a plan to reclaim what I believed was mine, but I had learned that love and family cannot be reclaimed. They must be earned, nurtured, and cherished. The lessons had been painful, but they had also been a necessary part of my journey. The villain in my own story had finally found her redemption. I looked at Liam, no longer with a sense of ownership, but with a deep, profound love, a love free from all the conditions I had once placed upon it. A year later, at a small private dinner to celebrate the paperback release of Liam's book, I sat across from him and David. The setting was intimate, the atmosphere filled with genuine warmth. We were no longer characters in a grand drama, but just a family sharing a meal. The tension that had once filled the air was gone, replaced by an effortless ease. Liam raised his glass. "To the people who inspired me," he said, looking at both of us, a genuine smile on his face. "To a journey of forgiveness and new beginnings." We clinked glasses, the sound a soft chime of finality and hope. I looked at David, and he smiled, a real, genuine smile, free of any of the tension that had once existed between us. We had found a truce, a common ground built on our shared love for Liam. We discussed plans for the holidays, and for the first time in years, the conversation felt effortless, unburdened by the past. The city outside, with its millions of stories, no longer felt like a stage for my own drama. It was simply the backdrop of my life. I had been so desperate to be the hero, to be the one on the stage, but I had learned that true strength lies in a different kind of role. It's in the quiet support, the selfless love, the ability to step back and let someone else shine. I had to lose everything to realize what was truly important. The public humiliation, the isolation, the shame, they were all a necessary part of my journey. I was no longer the villain of my story. I was just a mother, finally at peace, surrounded by the family I had almost lost. The journey had been long and filled with heartache, but in the end, it was a story of redemption. My story. And it was a story worth telling. Thank you for watching. We hope you were moved by this story of forgiveness and personal growth. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. We can't wait to hear from you.